Is reducing the travelling time from Manchester to London worth £30 billion?
The expenditure on the new rail system of £30 billion, is it worth it just to reduce the travelling time to Manchester from London, Alan Johnson?
If it was just that, maybe not, but it's about much more than that. Listen, there hasn't been a new railway built towards the north of England for well over 100 years. This is about capacity. Yes, it increases the speed at which you can travel north, and that's very important. But our creaking Victorian rail system, thank goodness the Victorians did that for us, put that infrastructure in, had the foresight to do it 200 years ago. We need now to have the foresight to recognise that we have a 19th century rail system in a 21st century economy.
All right, let's hear from a member Alred straight away. Yes.
Rather than spending billions on a new rail infrastructure, surely it's better to spend the money sorting out the current rolling stock and focusing on the fact that there are people in this country commuting to work spending thousands of pounds on train fare to stand all the way there and all the way back.
Dom Jolly, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I'm slightly worried because James Delingpole is nodding with me, but I totally agree with you. I live in the Cotswolds, and when I go into London, I go from a place called Kemble to London, and as far as I can work out, I think I'm the sort of person that turns up on the day. I don't get a season ticket because I don't work regularly, and when I turn up, I think it is mile per mile the most expensive railway journey in the world. And I love the fact that we're going to get this high-speed railway. I've been to Japan, I've been on the Shinkansen, I've been on the TGVs in France 20 years ago, but it kind of feels a bit... It's all over, really. I mean, it's kind of like we're sort of investing in the Walkman when the iPod's already going. And I think in a big country, over 400 miles, say, something like these high-speed trains are really important. But in England, I don't think we need them. Let's invest in the sort of the railway stock we've already got, and let's get it back with a company that actually owns the whole thing together and makes it work properly. It's crazy.
And it also strikes me that it's kind of 20 years too late because telecommunications have moved on so fast that most people now can actually do things by their computers. They don't need to catch a train.
OK. Saeed Abbasi, it doesn't seem that popular with this audience, £1,000 a household spent on this.
I'm very much supportive of what Alan has said, because it's not just the journey time between London and the north, it's actually the journey time between the northern cities. So if you take, for example, Leeds to Birmingham, that journey time will be halved. If you take the journey times between Leeds to Manchester, Birmingham to Manchester, it'll be the interconnectivity. And it can't be right, I think, like Alan said, that it's been over 100 years since there's been any major rail infrastructure in the north of England. This will have huge benefits for connectivity.
It's going to be a hard sell, because we're in the north of England here in Lancaster, and you saw universal applause for the point Dom Jolly made, that there are better things you can do with the money.
I think Dom makes some really important points in relation to rolling stock. Of course, we have to invest in that. He makes important points in relation to pricing. He makes important points in relation to the quality and standing on lots of important points. But I also think, look, there's never been a major infrastructure project, even if you go back to when the Victorians were building railways. In fact, somebody at the time, a doctor at the time, said that we mustn't have fast trains because it would stop people from breathing on them, from breathing within those trains. So there will always be people who will criticise.
Arguing that.
No, but there will.
To be fair, if you've been on First Grace Western, there are times where it's so full you can't breathe.
But I think, look, there will always be concerns about what this will do for the environment, whether this is good value for money. But if we're concerned about the fact that we are 10 years behind or 20 years behind what's happening in Japan, we can't be sat here in 10 years' time saying, well, we actually didn't do anything. This is absolutely vital infrastructure.
We'll be 40 years
and the
behind,
North will see the benefits of it, and that's why I'm hugely
We're going to be 40 years
of it.
behind Japan, aren't we? Because it's going to be 20 years from now before it's online. I'll come to members of the audience in a moment, but James Delingpole.
So we've got the political class, represented by Alan and Saida, versus the ordinary people. It seems that the political class want their grand projet to dump on the British people, costing us £30 billion. Well, I'm sure that's just an underestimate. I'm sure it's going to go far above that. I was on the train on the way here, and there was an incredibly annoying person sitting opposite me, on his mobile, running his... Dom, it wasn't you. It wasn't you. He was running his office on his mobile. He was doing sort of executive boast speak. He was sounding like David Brent, briefing his staff, buoying up his sales team. It was very annoying, but this is how people operate these days. They use the train for the internet and stuff. It doesn't matter whether
Well, you mean they just, instead of having an office, go backwards and forwards?
They use the train as their office. It doesn't matter if they can get from Manchester to London in 10 seconds, I believe, is the latest
So why do you think
figure
the political class, as you put it, want this and other people don't? I mean, what's
because
the merit?
they're stuck for what to do with our failing economy, and they think that maybe on the Keynesian principle you have these big projects, these big capital spending projects which are going to improve the economy.
And do you not agree with that? Because many people say that is the right thing.
I agree with Dom, despite his cheap shot earlier on. I think we should upgrade our existing stock. It's what the people want.
You, sir, up there.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Perhaps before we start spending such a vast amount of money on reducing travelling times between Manchester and London, we should spend some money on creating some business in the north of England to get this part of the country back to work.
The woman in yellow there.
This is just wrong. It'll make matters worse. I mean, it could even drain away jobs from the north because it will just make it faster for people to get from the northwest down to London. What we need is investment in this region. At the moment, it takes you nearly as long to get from Lancaster to Liverpool as it does to get from Lancaster to London. And what about... you know, the north doesn't finish at Manchester. Yeah. It actually barely starts.
Yes, what do you think?
I think that if we don't invest in the infrastructure now, we're going to have to invest in infrastructure at some point in the future. If this government doesn't invest, then a government in the future is going to have to. And sooner or later, the Victorian railways are going to break down, they're going to stop working. They're going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to fix them anymore.
But this project only deals with the certain places it's going to, because it's so high speed, only stops about 4 places in the country. What about everyone else that can't get on those trains?
Are you surprised that there's such almost universal hostility here in Lancaster to the project?
I'm surprised because I've always respected the intelligence and goodwill of the people of Lancaster.